Okay,
Bismillah.
we should be good to go. My
Yes.
friend is logging on momentarily, and then inshallah, once he's on, I'll go ahead and intro him. But we can go ahead and begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulih Nabi al-Kareem. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another session of our Iqbal study. We're going to go ahead and jump into today's lesson. But before I jump into today's lesson, as I'm pulling it up on the screen, we're going to have a special guest today who actually just logged on, but we'll introduce him in a moment. But today we're going to be talking about Allama Iqbal's poetry today, and we're going to be doing the eighth, or technically the 41, 42, and 43 is what we're going to be going over. And Dr. Saab, inshallah, maybe we can go ahead and start reading this first section. And then once we get through this first bang, I'll go ahead and introduce Asad. And then we can go ahead and get started, inshallah.
Sounds good. So we covered Shikwa first, and then we started Jawab Shikwa.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, we gave the background, and we had covered three band from Jawab Shikwa.
Yeah.
And now we are at a stage where some voice is coming from the divine
Yeah.
regarding our Shikwa. So here this band says, Kis kadar tum pe garan, subh ki bedari hai.
Yeah.
हमसे कब प्यार है, हाँ नींद तुम्हें प्यारी है.
Yeah.
तबे आजाद पे कैदे रमजान भारी है, तुम ही कह दो यही आईने वफादारी है. कौम मजहब से है, मजहब जो नहीं तुम भी नहीं, जज्बे बाहम जो नहीं, महफिले अंजम भी नहीं.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. किस कदर तुम पे गरां सुबह की बेदारी है.
Mm.
So meaning that how difficult it is for you. किस कदर तुम पे ये बोझ पड़ा हुआ है. How difficult is it for you कि सुबह की बेदारी में, यानी सुबह में नमाज पढ़ने के लिए तुम भी नहीं उठ सकते हो और अपने आप को मुसलमान कहते हो.
Yeah.
And gara was in reference to something that's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then हमसे कब प्यार है. हाँ नींद तुम्हें प्यारी है. So हमारे प्यार में, हमारे इश्क में तुम डूब कर मरने के लिए तैयार तो नहीं हो. You're all about your sleep, right?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
the Imam is saying as-salatu khayrun min an-nawm, फजर तुम पे भारी पड़ जाती है.
बिल्कुल.
पढ़ने वो भारी पड़ जाती है. And it's really interesting because like he's talking about rituals, right? And a lot of times people will discard rituals or say that Iqbal was not really a ritualistic Muslim, right? Whether he was or wasn't isn't our concern, but what we are concerned with is what's in front of us is that he's giving strength, he's giving an idea to rituals here. He's saying that there is some, उसमें कुछ प्यार है, खुदा की जो प्यार और मोहब्बत होने की जो जरूरत पड़ती है, it's through these rituals that there is some iota of understanding that you care about God at the end. That was something very interesting. Sarah, no, you're good. We just started. And then it goes on. तबे आज़ादी वे क़ैद रमज़ान भी भारी है, or क़ैद रमज़ान भारी है. That तबे आज़ादी, that your free-spirited nature, I guess that would be a good way to look at it.
तबे आजाद.
Oh, तबे आज़ाद, sorry,
तबे आजाद पे, on your free, you just want to be left alone, you want to be free. कैदे रमजान, the शर्त उसकी जो रमजान की शर्त है, that kind of imprisonment of having to fast, bahari है, it's difficult for you. Let me just go back to the first two lines also, if you don't mind, Nihal, for one reason. एक तो यह कि उसको पढ़ना सही जाइए, किस कदर तुम पे गरां सुबह की बेदारी है. How you find it so, do you realize how difficult you find to wake up in the morning? That's what he's saying. हमसे कब प्यार है? Who says that you love us? हाँ, yes, नींद तुम्हें प्यारी. Oh yeah, you do love sleep. You don't love me, you love sleeping. That's what the divine voice is telling humans, to mu'minin. Then तबे आजाद पे कैदे रमजान भारी है. You are a free spirit, and the fact that you have to fast, that particular the condition that you must fast, that you find it very, very hard or difficult for you. To me, keh do, you say yourself. यही आईने वफादारी है. Is this the loyalty? Is this being true to my the agreement that you made to be loyal to me?
Hmm.
So आईने वफादारी is you have to be humble before God, and we made that covenant. Are you keeping that?
Yeah.
तुम ही कह दो, tell me. You yourself said, do you think this is the way to say that you are really obeying my commands?
Aine wafadari refers to basically like the trajectory or the formula of loyalty, right?
Yeah. Well, Ain, not only formula, it's the constitutionality. Ain means constitution, but here Ain is the way of following, the method of following what you have agreed upon. So in
Yeah.
other words, it goes from Yom Last, and then at that time you agreed and you understood that I'm your creator, and you're not staying loyal to that agreement.
Yeah. So I guess the जो लफ्ज उसमें शामिल हो जाता है is that दस्तूर, like you said, constitutionality.
Yes, right. The
Yeah.
stoor may be like bylaws,
Yeah.
constitution and bylaws. When you write the constitution, that's in broader term. Bylaws is how you will follow it, standing up, sitting down, burning down, and all that.
Yeah.
This is just to follow you. कि वो दस्तूर और आइन, that is the difference in these two.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Hmm.
And then कौम मजहब से है, मजहब जो नहीं तुम भी नहीं. यानी कौम मजहब से है that without religion you don't exist within a nation, right? That without religion your existence within a group of people is not there. You're just yourself, or even then you're nothing at the end of it. Because
well, if you're right, कौम मजहब से है. A nation is there because of a religion, a way of life. Mazhab jo nahi, if you lose that religion, then tum bhi nahi, then you don't exist. In other words, if you adhere to the religion, a way of life that has been given to you, then you are a nation. I'll accept you as a group together. But once you give that up, mazhab jo nahi, tum bhi nahi. And when you lose that way of life, then you don't exist.
yeah, not only that, a lot of people sometimes when they look at the word mazhab, mazhab in Urdu means faith or religion, but then in
Yes.
Arabic it refers to your school of thought,
Right.
But what's interesting is that it comes from the root of dhahaba, which means two things. Number one, it means to go somewhere or to tread a path, or number two is gold. But literally, madhab is the place that one treads. So when it's moved into the Urdu and it's talking about faith, you can still take that idiosyncrasy with the Arabic and understand that it's a path to tread. Like to be mazhab se apne aap ko जुड़ के साथ रखना है. It's literally that's what it means, is that you're associating yourself to a group. So that's why he's saying قوم مذهب से ही है, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah. So as long as you are together, as long as you adhere to a way of life, then you exist as a nation because you're together, following the same path.
Yeah.
Yeah, you translated it very well because of that Arabic and Urdu part.
Yeah.
Iqbal has used mazhab in all those three meanings that you mentioned. Faith, religion, basically way of life, and also a path to tread on, a guidance, or the rules, traveling rules, or what do you say, the light on the path of your travel.
Yeah.
All these encapsulated in mazhab.
Sounds good. And then jazbe baham, excuse me, jazbe baham jo nahi mahfil anjum bhi nahi.
Beautiful.
Right? And that's why it brings it together. And
Jazbe baham,
attraction,
attraction
right?
between each other.
Yeah.
Amongst yourself. One attraction, baham, with each other. Jazb is attraction, baham, with each other. Jo nahi, mahfil anjum bhi nahi. Then this togetherness is not. The mahfil is the assembly, anjum is the stars. So he's saying that as the stars have relationship to each other, and they are basically keeping a certain distance, and they are together under a specific rule. They do not crash with each other. They have attraction to each other. They have their gravity related to each other, and they travel more or less in sync, so they don't destroy each other. इसी तरह जज्बे बाहम जो नहीं, you have to have that kind of a relationship with each other, just like the stars do. Mahfil Anjum is set so that they don't crash with each other's. Neither should you. You should have that kind of an attraction, stick together so that you create a beautiful Milky Way on the sky.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to comment about?
No, this needs a lot of commentary really from people.
Yeah.
Amir, do you have anything to say? Are you on? No, he's not on. Okay.
Let me actually intro my friend Asad Dandia. He's actually with us.
Oh, mashallah.
So Asad is actually originally from Brooklyn, where he's a writer, organizer, and a grad student. And he recently completed his master's degree at Columbia University, where his master's thesis was titled Rethinking Islamic Studies, Muhammad Iqbal's Philosophy as Decolonial Critique.
Wow.
He also served as a teaching assistant for courses in Islamic law and spirituality at NYU, and is the co-host of the New Books in Middle East Studies podcast at the New Books Network. And he was a 2020 fellow at the LA Review of Books Publishing Workshop. He has a bachelor's in social work from NYU, and he draws his experience as an academic and a community organizer to connect theory with practice on a range of different subjects. So I'm actually also going to show you guys a really interesting article that he wrote. Whenever you have some time, I'll drop the link actually in the comments. But it was a translation and transliteration and commentary on Jibril o Iblis that was written by Allama Iqbal. It's a quite thoroughly written article. I'd recommend that you all take some time out to read it. But Asad, thank you for being with us. Would love to hear your commentary so far on what you've seen in the last 18 minutes, perhaps, and then continue to just, informally just talk about your work and, where you see Iqbal studies going and what you would like to see and whatnot.
Welcome, Asad. This is Dr. Abdul Rahman.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Dr. Abdul Rahman, Nihal, thank you for that very generous introduction. Nihal is a very kind, good friend of mine for a long time, and he invited me to sort of share a little bit of my thoughts and ideas about some of the work I've done on Iqbal studies, Iqbalian thought.
Nihal, you can take away the slide so that we can see him. If you.
Yeah. I'm just actually going to do that right now.
Yeah, good. Good. Now we'll meet him.
So yeah, I appreciate the discussion, and I thank you again, Nihal, for hosting me. I think the interesting thing about Iqbal, and particularly his poetry, I think it's hard to read it if you don't also read it in dialogue with his other writings, right? So a lot of people distinguish between his prose, right, the reconstruction of religious thought in Islam, and then his poetry. I like to think the two of them are interconnected, and they both represent sort of the development of his ideas and how those ideas were shaped by the context of his time. And so we, for example, in this particular poem, Bangedara numbers 40, 41, 42, I believe it was, I think provides a glimpse into some of the struggles that the Muslim community in colonial India was going through at the time. One of the major crises was a crisis of identity. How should the Muslims of India under colonial occupation identify and organize themselves as a collective community or as a nation, a qawm, so to say. And so one of the people on the forefront of engaging this question was, of course, Allama Iqbal. There were others, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, Jinnah, as we know, but I think what really makes Allama unique and something that has not really been talked about in the academy. So just to give you, a brief background on myself, most of my training is in the secular academia, so university setting. And
where were you born, Asad, if I may ask you?
Brooklyn, New York.
You were born here. Yeah. I
am.
spent my life in Brooklyn. So
Inshallah, inshallah. I'm in
Dr.
the,
Levant's actually a retired hematologist oncologist who now lives in it's
My
actually
practice was in Brooklyn Hospital, Long Island University area, across
okay.
from
but he
juniors.
left America and moved to Staten Island.
That's funny.
Very good. So I have finally a granny, we call it, somebody from my place.
Yeah. No, I'm a
I
lifelong.
spent 50 plus years in Brooklyn. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
I'm 28 years old. So I've spent 28 years in Brooklyn.
What is the difference? 22, 82, they made
Right.
yeah. You turn these figures around, so no big deal.
You're right. So my family's Pakistani, and my grandparents are from North India, Lucknow. I wish I had some of the training that Nihal got from the seminaries there. But I can say this is that from what I've studied in the academic settings here, a lot of times what happens is that people detach Allama's poetry and his writings from his context, or they try to, what they do often is they don't connect it to the Islamic tradition. They usually try to connect it to European ideas first and foremost, right? So when we talk about qawm, right, nationhood, a lot of people they apply a European and a Christian European perspective to Allama's ideas. And of course, when you do that, you don't really understand what he's trying to say, and so people frame him as a nationalist. Now, this is, sadly, this is of course prevalent even in South Asia now, where he's regarded as one of the founding fathers of the state. But my argument and what I'm trying to say is that when you box him into these categories, you end up missing out on a lot of the wisdom of his writings and his works. And so what I try to do in my thesis, but also generally, is I try to read Iqbal's poetry independently of some of these labels like nationalist and as someone who was attempting to emulate
Nationalist, secularist.
right, like all of these isms. I encourage folks to read his poetry independently of these labels, and instead try to connect it to the Islamic tradition. So one chapter in my paper, it's called From Ibn Khaldun to Iqbal. And what I attempt to do is I read Ibn Khaldun, as everyone knows, the prominent social thinker, sociologist of the 15th century, North African Muslim. Iqbal drew great inspiration from him. And yet, if you read the academic literature, there is not much that draws a connection between these sort of classical and medieval Muslim thinkers and Iqbal's thought. And I like to think of Iqbal sort of as a continuation of these thinkers. So Ibn Khaldun has a very prominent theory of nationhood called Asabiyya. And Asabiyya, right, sometimes it is translated as nationalism again, but this is an incorrect translation. Rather, what Asabiyya really refers to is a concept of group solidarity that is rooted in an ethical conviction, right? A conviction of responsibility. In the Islamic tradition, we have this concept of amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar, enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. And so Ibn Khaldun's theory of Asabiyya, I argue, is very much connected to this Muslim conception of group solidarity, of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, and being a light unto the nations. In the Quran, there's a verse, very famous verse, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. Right, you are the best of nations, drawn out or drawn forth from mankind, because you enjoin the good and you forbid the evil and you believe in God. Right. What I find interesting is that enjoining good and forbidding evil are the first qualities, right? And believing in God is connected to those qualities. And so when I read Allama's discussion about qawm and belonging and identity, I try to connect it to the Islamic tradition of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil and serving as ethical I guess, guides. Right?
You are probably taking it too deep into it. But anyway, we basically get the idea as to what your expertise in Iqbal is. So it will be great to really, hear you at length on some of
Thank
these
you.
topics, the work you have done. But today, I think we don't want to put too much burden on you. Let's at least
Appreciate it.
finish your little stuff, and then we will, at the time of questions and discussion, of course, we will then listen to everybody.
I think that was most of what I had to say.
No,
And
that's a great introduction that you gave, and we now know your interest and depth of your knowledge about background of Iqbal. Of course, you have a perspective that is fairly alien to us, most of us that were raised over in South Asia, because we have been in a different kind of company where Iqbal had different allegations against him. You see him from a outside point of view, and your associates are people that you interact with consider him as a nationalist or whatever else. He was far from it. He did not like the nation theory, although he wanted a separate nation for Pakistan, but he considered all Muslims to be one ummah. But these are the discussions for a later time. And I understand now, and I'm glad that you're from Brooklyn area that I call my home.
But I think one thing that was really helpful was the points that Asad made about Ibn Khaldun. Right? For those of you that are not familiar with him, it's important to know who he is.
Yes.
To give you an idea of how, it's not a measure, but a couple of years ago, Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddama, the Muqaddama Ibn Khaldun, like the primer to Ibn Khaldun, was actually highlighted by Mark Zuckerberg when he bought it, and it ended up becoming like the #1 bestseller online. But the idea of foam that Asad had brought out, like, it kept reminding me of Allama Iqbal's, the lines that he said, foam kya cheez hai, foam ki imamat kya hai, right? That what is actually a nation, but it's interesting.
Isko kya samjhe?
Yeah, kya samjhe ye do rakat ke imam, right? So, but that was really interesting, which I appreciate, Asad, that you just brought in, and just talking about this idea of foam. And I think Dr. Saab, I think you had highlighted this as well, where you were saying, ye qawm ka matlab kya hai, right? Like,
Yes.
what is this qawm at the end of the day? And I think now we're going to get into it. And I think the next few lines that we're going to read, it's going to be in response to a lot of what was being said in Shikwa, right? And it's kind of like a backhand to kind of respond to people. And I think we can kind of move on to these next slides, but let me just see. I think somebody was typing.
Does anybody else have to say anything about this particular band that we just finished?
Someone was saying something.
Mughal Bhai, any questions in your mind?
Yeah, I think Amr mentioned something. Amr said that Ibn Khaldun is recognized in the West as the father of sociology. Yes, that is true. He was, he was somebody that was a big deal. So.
Very good. Okay, so we'll get to the next band.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you so much. And in fact, as you said, just a small piece of trivia there is that his muqaddama, as you said, his introduction was intended to be written as an introduction for a book of history. So he intended to write like Tarikh al-Tabari. He wanted to write a history of humanity. And he, mashallah, his introduction was intended to be an analysis of history. And that was deemed the first such analytical work to try to find the themes and patterns of history and hence sociology.
Wow. So can anybody give a link to it so we can read it? Because these are new things for me.
Yeah.
Honestly.
If somebody can just like Google it's the Franz Rosenthal English translation. He was the professor at Princeton. If somebody can just find the Amazon link and just put it at the bottom.
Yeah, that will be great. I mean, even now or maybe later when you have a chance, so you can give a little to all the people that are sharing this. You can just give this as an appendix if anybody wants to expand further. Okay. जिनको आता नहीं दुनिया में कोई फन तुम हो, नहीं जिस कौम को परवाए नशेमन तुम हो, और बिजलियां जिसमें हूँ आसूदा वो खरमन तुम हो, और बेच खाते हैं जो असलाफ के मदफन तुम हो निको नाम जो कब्रों की तजारत करके, क्या ना बेचोगे जो मिल जाए सनम पत्थर के. So let me read it simply.
Yeah.
जिनको दुनिया में कोई फन नहीं आता वो तुम हो, जिस कौम को नशेमन की परवाह नहीं है वो तुम हो, तुम वो खरमन हो जिसमें बिजलियां आसूदा हैं। जो लोग अपने बड़ों के मदफन, असलाफ के मदफन जहां वो दफन है, वो चीजें बेच के खा जाते हैं, वो तुम हो।
Yeah.
तुम अगर कब्रों की तजारत करके अपना नाम नेक बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हो, और वो आजकल अपनी बड़ाई करते हो आप अपनी कब्रों की तजारत करके, अगर तुम्हें पत्थर के बने हुए बुत मिल जाए तो क्या तुम वो भी बेच के मुनाफा नहीं कमाओगे? क्या ना बेचोगे जो मिल जाए सनम पत्थर के?
Capitalism at its finest.
हाँ, कब्रों की तजारत करके तुम नेक नाम बनते हो। अगर तुम्हें पत्थर के सनम मिल जाएंगे तो क्या तुम बेचोगे? नहीं ना बेचोगे। तो दिस इज सिंपल वे व्हाट ही इज ट्राइंग टू से।
We can get to this in a second, but Dr. Saab, is there some hidden meaning that he's saying? Like we always hear about kabron ki puja, kabron ki tijarat. Like, is it just saying that mankind is just always prone to want to make a profit with munafiq ke piche bhag rahe hain?
नहीं, he actually is talking about selling your religious wear. In other words, इसी तरह when you teach Islam and you charge a price for it, इसी तरह when you have Qabristan where people should be buried for free, which was the tradition all along.
Yeah.
It started to be sold. So, but he's not talking about the land itself. He's talking about वहां से कपड़े में चुरा के लोग कफन चुरा के बेचते हैं वगैरह वगैरह.
Yeah.
तो अगर वो कहता है कि तुम तो अपने जो बड़े हैं, बुजुर्ग जो गुजर गए हैं, जिनके बारे में तुमने पहले कहा है कि हमने ये किया, हमने वो किया अल्लाह तुम्हारे लिए, तो वो जिनका तुम नाम लेके अपने आप को नेक बता रहे हो, तुम तो उनके कफन भी बेच देते हो, उनके मदफन भी बेच देते हो. तो तुमको अगर मिल जाएंगे कोई चीज पत्थर के सनम कोई लाए के देगा तो भी बेच के तुम अपना मुनाफा कमाओगे. He's basically giving very microscopic kind of a critique of a particular little society somewhere where he's around. This may not be holding true everywhere in Islamic world, but it did hold true in that part of India at the time.
Yeah. And I think it also speaks today to how, I think one thing that it also goes back to, before a lot of these Islamic empires were abolished, everything was run on a waqf, right? The scholars were paid on a waqf. And then on top of that, people were buried according to a waqf. And then that system is gone. And now even in the United States, you sometimes see this someplace, right? Where you have this like televangelism. I like to call it Islamic televangelism, where people are charging thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars to just do basic Islamic things, right? And I think he's going to talk about this as well. And I think that critique is going to come in here. But then from the
exactly.
top,
let me give a simple English translation of these verses. I forgot that.
Yeah.
जिनको आता नहीं दुनिया में कोई फन तुम हो. Those people who do not know any art at all, that's you kind of people. नहीं जिस कौम को परवाए नशेमन तुम हो. A nation that has no worries about having a country of their own or a place where they can stay in peace together. You are the ones. बिजलियां जिसमें हूं आसूदा वो खरमन तुम हो. This is a beautiful part. This is खरमन is where you put all your crops when you finish your field.
Yeah.
And you put this together, and it's what you're going to eat for the next year or so. बिजलियां जिसमें हूं आसूदा. In other words, it's such a delicate thing. You are full of resource, but only it needs a spark. The spark is hidden in there. It could just destroy itself any minute. You are very delicate in that sense.
Harman is like grain, right?
Huh?
Harman is grain, right?
No, Harman is grains, pile of grain.
Yeah.
You see, this goes to the villagers who have a field that is ready, and they just cut it, and then they put all the anaj. If you have a cornfield, the corn and all that is separated from all the stems. So where you stack the corn, that would be Harman. It'll be a heap of corn.
Yeah.
Or wheat or rice or whatever you are growing on the field. So bijliyan jisme hua suda, that's the secret, that it can burn any time. asuda is they are lying underneath, they are hidden in there. So you are a tinderbox ready to be destroyed. Bech khate hain jo aslaf ke madfan tum ho. You are the people that sell the burial places of your ancestors.
Yeah.
हो निको नाम जो कब्रों की तजारत करके, if now that you getting a good name after selling the grave sites, क्या ना बेचोगे जो मिल जाए सनम पत्थर के? Wouldn't you sell if you got yourself some idols made out of stone? You would even sell those.
Yeah.
In other words, you would practically look for your personal gain and profit and not really worry about a community or communal or religious kind of demands that are placed on you.
And Niko naam is a reference to somebody.
नेक नाम.
नाम
वो
रोशन है.
हैं?
तो उसका नाम रोशन है, अच्छा नाम है उसका.
हाँ नहीं नेक नाम वही होता है ना, the person with a good name, good reputation.
तुम्हारा नाम इतना अच्छा है जो कब्रों की तिजारत करते हो.
नहीं तुम तजारत कब्रों की तजारत करके अपने आप को नेक नाम समझते हो.
Yeah, exactly what I'm saying. तुम्हारा नाम इतना नेक है जो तुम कब्रों की वो तिजारत करते हो.
नहीं कब्रों की तजारत करने की वजह से तुम अपने आप को नेक समझते हो निको नाम जो कब्रों की तजारत करके after selling the graves you are glorifying yourself, your name. So this is the reverse. You are selling the grave sites and then you glorify yourself because of that, calling yourself doing something worthwhile.
क्या ना बेचोगे जो मिल
क्या ना बेच, this is a question mark. Won't you sell if you found yourself idols made of stone? If you were to find those, you would sell those also. In other words, he's making you almost like a non-believer.
Yeah, you tell off your faith.
Yeah.
Anyone have anything to add? Asad, any thoughts?
No, this is good. Keep going, inshallah. I have something to add very soon.
Okay.
All right. So this is basically the just putting Iqbal in his place from the divine. He's basically giving the background as to why things are what they are. Then itemized आगे जवाब आएगा इकबाल के सवालों के. तो next one जो है सफाए दहर से.
Oh, this is the fun one.
Yeah. सफाए दहर से बातिल को मिटाया किसने? Because Iqbal had asserted that we did this.
नहीं डॉक्टर साहब इसका जो टोन होना चाहिए ना. हाँ बताओ किसने कहा था? तुमने कहा था, तुमने बोला था ना.
Exactly. That is the point here. Exactly.
हाँ. तुमने
you were saying that सफाए दहर से बातिल को मिटाया हमने. अब नौ जवाब आता है सफाए दहर से बातिल को मिटाया किसने? अरे नौ इंसानी को गुलामी से छुड़ाया किसने? मेरे काबे को जबीनों से बसाया किसने? मेरे कुरान को सीनों से लगाया किसने? थे तो आबा वो तुम्हारे ही, मगर तुम क्या हो? हाथ पर हाथ धरे मुंतजरे फरदा हो. Beautiful.
Yeah. And for those of you that remember when the reason I was making that tone was because if we all remember very consistently, right? I'm actually going to open up that slide because that was the one that I had made like a map for. But if you recall in Shikwa, right? He was one of the.
He was saying exactly the same thing. Instead of kisne, he said हमने.
Yeah.
That otherwise it was the same. सफादार को बातिल मुटाया हमने, नौ इंसान को गुलामी से छुड़ाया हमने, तेरे काबे को जबीनों से बसाया, तेरे कुरान को सीनों से लगाया हमने. फिर भी हमसे ये गिला है कि वफादार नहीं, हम वफादार नहीं, तू भी तो दिलदार नहीं.
Yeah.
This was that particular band to which now he's getting the response. And he said, oh, by the way, who is the one that removed the darkness from the face of the earth? Safaya Dhar. Dhar is the material world or this universe and the world. Batil is the falsehood or a kufr in this sense. Then this is the same. Who is the one that took the darkness away from the face of the earth? Now insani ko gulami se churaya kisne? Who is the one that liberated the humankind from servitude? Gulami. Mere Kabe ko jabinu se basaya kisne? Who is the one that actually adorned my Kaaba, or my place of my house of worship, by the prostration of their foreheads. Jabin is the forehead.
Yeah.
Who is the one that really adored my home, the Kaaba? Mere Quran ko seenon se lagaya. This is easy. Who is the one that held my book,
Yeah.
Quran, close to their chest or close to their heart? So then he answers. Then the answer comes in the next two lines. The to Abba. Abba is the ancestors, people that were in your lineage above you for generation. The to Abba wo tumhare hi. They were your ancestors. Yes, I grant you that. Magar tum kya? But who, what are you? Not who are you, but what are you? Magar tum kya ho? What are you? Haath par haath dhare. We are putting one hand over the other. Muntazare farda ho. You are waiting for tomorrow, waiting for your future. You are waiting for a day the next day to dawn, but doing absolutely nothing today by haath par haath dhare is as inactive as you can get.
Yeah.
Both hands are useless because you are putting one on top of each other. You're not even scratching your back.
Yeah.
That's how inactive you are. That's very, very heavy words that Iqbal has used here.
Yeah. Not only that, like I was thinking about this, Tito Aba wa tumhare, right? Wo tumhare abad hai. And I think this is something that speaks volumes. And I've said this before too. So many people will often align themselves with like other family members or other people from their past. And they're like, हाँ वो हमारे आबा व अजदाद थे. And I'm like, वो तुम्हारे आबा व अजदाद थे, तुमने कुछ नहीं कमाया जिंदगी में. Right? There are certain people, they only can sell themselves based on their social real estate, I like to say, right? That, oh, my ancestors did this and my ancestors did that. This, you know, now we're Sayyids, we're this and we're that. And we're going to get into that soon. Magar tum kya ho, right? And I think there's a lot of emphasis on this, right? And I think it begs people to really understand. It's not just an insult, it's also a call to reflect. Tum
Exactly.
kya ho, right?
Well, showing you the mirror.
Yeah. आईना दिखा दिया ना, that's the thing, right? किसने, right? किसने किया ये? किसने किया ये? बताओ, right? Yeah, and on one end, who was it? It's on one end saying it wasn't you, right?
Yeah.
Number two, it's someone else. Number three, who are you?
Yes.
It wasn't you, it was someone else, and who are you? तुम कौन हो?
Yeah. Now, ये क्या हो? क्या is कौन plus content. That's a beautiful word.
Yeah.
Which entails not only your person but your deeds also.
Yeah.
You and your possessions is क्या? See, कौन सी चीज पड़ी है is पिंजरे में? That could be a cat or a rat, right?
Yeah.
But क्या है means उसकी खासियत क्या, वो क्या कर सकती है, उसके पास और क्या. All of that is included in that. That's very clever poetry here, that he has said that you really are descendants from those people, but what are you?
Yeah.
Because you haven't described yourself.
Now I'm going to read this one more time. I'm going to put something on the screen.
Sure.
सफाए दहर से बातिल को मिटाया किसने? नौ इंसान को गुलामी से छुड़ाया किसने? मेरे काबे को जबीनों से बसाया किसने? मेरे कुरान को सीनों से लगाया किसने? Now look at this. This is from Shikwa. सफाए दहर से बातिल को मिटाया हमने, नौ इंसान को गुलामी से छुड़ाया हमने, तेरे काबे को जबीनों से बसाया हमने, तेरी कुरान को सीने से लगाया हमने, right? फिर भी हमसे ये गिला है कि वफादार नहीं, right? हम वफादार नहीं, तू भी तो
दिलदार नहीं, हाँ.
Right? And now we see the flip side to it, right? And literally repeating word for word what everyone else, or what now we were saying before.
It's like saying, excuse me, what did you say?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you put all the questions. सफाए दहर से बादल को मिटाया किसने? नौ इंसान की गुलामी से छुड़ाया किसने? मेरे काबे को जबीनों से बसाया किसने? और मेरे कुरान को सीनों से. Now the question is being put back to you. Did I hear you correctly? You said that I did this. Wow, you're taking credit for something. You didn't do it. They were your ancestors. But what are you? and you're waiting for tomorrow, things to happen for you. You're not making them happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and then not only that, haath par haath dahre, that means like literally you're sitting like with your hands like this.
Yeah.
Right? I say better,
Yeah.
so like post dawat after chai, hand on belly, don't know what to do, how to get up.
Exactly.
Okay?
For the
Muntazir
next day
farda
to
ke
come
liye.
up on. When he
Begum ke
says
intezar mein chalo
muntazar
ghar chalo.
farda, you can talk days for this only, muntazar farda, waiting for tomorrow. Here, there is the understanding that you are not making any tomorrow for yourself. You are letting the next day dawn on you without you really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And there are several examples in the literature where you will see where it says that if your tomorrow does not look better than your yesterday, then you are not alive. Sign of life is that your farda that you create for yourself should be better from your today. And for that, you cannot be haath par haath dhare. You cannot be sitting one hand on over the other.
You have to do something.
It's a beautiful symbolism that Iqbal has used here. It's unparalleled, beautiful.
Dr. Saab, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I find a lot of inspiration that a lot of people, when they retire, they retire. They're like, I'm done. And I think you're probably teaching every single day, right? How do you find that motivation to continue to do that? Because आप तो हाथ पर हाथ वो दहने नहीं बैठे, मुंतज़िर फरदा नहीं बैठे हुए हैं. And
there is a comedian in Pakistan. He's alive still. He's elderly now.
Yeah.
Anwar, क्या नाम है उनका? Anyway, that
I was going to say Moin Akhtar, but he's not around.
But no. He's a poet.
Yeah.
Anwar Maqsood. Anwar Maqsood.
नहीं. Anwar क्या नाम है उनका?
Anwar Maqsood.
अनवर मकसूद है.
जो मोइन अख्तर के साथ वो करता था.
नहीं, वो मकसूद दूसरा है, वो मसूद हैं.
अच्छा.
ये पंजाबी में और फारसी में वहां पे पंजाब के हैं ये. तो उनका एक मशगला है कि when I was little, my parents wanted me to be a doctor. अगर जैसे अल्लाह रखे उसे कौन चखे, which means we used to make a satire that my parents wanted me to be a doctor, but I became a scholar, Urdu and Persian scholar and a teacher. Here in my case also, I loved Urdu when I was little, but I wanted to emulate my dad and become a physician. My father was a Hakim, Huda Bakshe unhe. So I became a physician, but my true love was really literature and languages. I love to learn languages and know the root words for different words and all that stuff. And this is my passion, and I should have retired earlier. I waited to age 70 to retire, but I don't have much time. But if I was to retire 10 years earlier, then I would have really done a little bit, some kind of a work in literature. I'm learning, but
I mean, you retired at 70, but now you're 65 because you've been doing what you love.
Yeah, but all my life, I have kept kind of a little bit of a time for myself, and I was not too much in my profession.
Yeah,
I did what I needed to do, but did not spend full 24 hours into it. I kept my interest.
Yeah.
Anyways,
let's open it up, inshallah. Asad, if you can kind of hop back with us. This was actually a reaction, right? This is supposed to be a divine response to Shikwa, right? What he had said. That you're the people that removed batil, you're the people that returned people or took people out of servitude and slavery, and you're the people that bowed your heads to the Kaaba, you're the people that put the Quran to your chests. No, that wasn't you, those are your ancestors. And I feel like a lot of times Muslims have those similar sentiments. They actually don't do anything, but just, again, everyone wants to use the social proximity to come to make a self-image for themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks for having me back. I'm sorry I had to step away for 2 minutes. I had to pick something up. Yeah, I think, the interesting thing about both of these texts, Shikwa and Jawab Shikwa, I feel like they're not just the voice of the poet, they're the voice of the community. And the expression that he's writing here are expressions that were pervasive back in his time, but also in our time, where like you said, social proximity, right? Or historical proximity. Basically, as we say, piggybacking on the accomplishments of your predecessors without creating anything new with their own hands. And I think the purpose of this poem is to drive home that point, is to say that your ancestors did a lot of great things, and it's important to remember them and to recall them and to learn from them. But you have to take it to the next level. You have to take, your own agency in your own hands and do something about the condition that you are in. And that sort of nostalgia is, I think, what he's drawing attention to in this poem, is that nostalgia is good if it serves to inspire you, but it can also become bad, or a source of complacency, or a source of, dare I say, laziness, if you don't use it, if you don't draw from it to change the conditions of your present moment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I
beautiful
think,
perspective. Yes, that's one aspect of it. Yes.
Yes, that's true.
You see, also look at this. If you take these four things, this gives a tremendous lesson as to what our responsibility should be. As a true Muslim, we should hold the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to our heart. We should again go to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do ibadat, and that doesn't only mean just salat, but it only means serving his creation in whatever we do in our way of life. We should be really taking care of his creation. Then we should make sure that no humans suffer under the pressure of another. So that is another thing that we have to do, making sure that everybody has freedom in the sense of how they want to live and how they want to raise their families and all that stuff. So nobody should be a slave of another human being.
Yeah.
And then basically that will end the tyranny and the falsehood in this world and bring back the kind of governance and the rule of law that is the divinely destined for us. So all of this, if you take it one step deeper, means that when you do all of these things, then you are really discharging your responsibility as a believer and a custodian of message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So what's interesting is that the word insan,
Mhm.
that Noah insan actually comes from the root word in Arabic of forgetting, nasiya, nisyan, right? Sometimes we forget. So because of the fact that I am an insan, I realized that we completely skipped 2 full bongs. Inshallah we'll do it next week, but haath bezor hain, haath se dil khubar hain. So there's just 2 bongs, we missed that one, and then wo bhi din the ke yahi ranai thi or ranai tha. So we're gonna inshallah do that from next week, but I have no idea how I skipped that, but we did get 3 other bongs in. So
Kiska?
we did 3 bongs today, right? Kis qadar tum pe garna subah ki bedari, and then we did jinko aata nahi duniya mein koi fun, we did that, and then safai dahar se batil ko mitaya. So we did those 3, but then I don't know what happened, but I completely skipped. I guess I flipped a page and I flipped it without doing it, but from haath bezor hain, haath se dil khubar hain, we didn't do that.
Well, we can do that next time, or we can quickly go over it now and finish with it.
You think we can do it in 5 minutes?
Less than that.
Okay.
Let me do that. वो भी दिन थे कि यही माया रानाई था, मां नाजिश मौसम गुल लालाए सहराई था, जो मुसलमान था अल्लाह का सौदाई था, कभी महबूब तुम्हारा यही हर जाई था, किसी यकजाई से अबैद गुलामी कर लो, मिल्लत अहमद मुरसल को मकामी कर लो. This was a very satire way of really
He's responding to the Harjai comment.
basically, because that was a tough allegation, and the response came also in that kind of a tone.
Yeah.
वो भी दिन थे कि यही माया रानाई था. Your clan, your Muslims, your community, this was the really source of the beauty of your deen or your community, Nazish Mosem Gul, Lala Sarai tha. Lala Sarai is referring to these his ancestors. This flower that is blossoming in a desert, which were the Muslims. Nazish Mosem Gul. Nazish means the pride. Mosem Gul is the springtime. Lala Sarai, a flower that is in the desert. Jo Musalman tha Allah ka saudai tha. Every Muslim was so intoxicated into the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was to the point of really being madly in love with him. Kabhi mahbub tumhara yahi harjai hai. Do you remember me? Yahi jisko tum aaj harjai keh rahe hote ho. Kabhi isi ko tum mahbub kehte the. Kabhi tum there was a time when you used to call me your beloved. Are you calling me harjai now? Then the divine message comes, kisi yakjai se ab aide gulami kar lo. Go now and find somebody that stays with one kind of a people only. Millat Ahmed Mursal ko maqami kar lo. You make your own the community or the millat of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the Muslims of today. Maqami kar lo. Put them in one place in the world only, in one station, and find one person to rule over you and forget me then. Because I rule everywhere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. So if you want to be in some place where you think that it should be two-way between one and you, and I should forget the rest of my creation and only direct myself to you, then go ahead and isolate yourself from some place and maqami ban jao, not universal. Millat Ahmed Mursal ko maqami kar lo. Go localize your believers in Prophet Muhammad into one little place and do not stay global like you are now. So this is basically was that tone that Iqbal had addressed ke tu bhi to harjai hai. So in response, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that yes,
अब दुनिया फिर कर आ गए हो, अब लौट जाओ सही से. You know, that's what's going through my head, right? Sometimes I'm just like, it's important to put ourselves within that narrative, see how does it come out, right? And then literally it's like unko tanbih kar rahe hain, right? इंसान की तनबीह हो रही है.
बिल्कुल.
Right? And it's just like तुम घूम लिया, फिर लिया, तुमने मस्तियां करना था कर लिया, अब घर आ जाओ और जो काम करने का है वो आके करो.
बिल्कुल.
You know.
Otherwise, if you ये नहीं पहले तो
गालियां भी सुना लिया, नाराजगी भी दिखा लिया, ठीक है, पूरे वो दिल की भड़ास निकाल लिया तुमने, अब लौट जाओ.
Because there was a time जो मुसलमान था अल्लाह का सौदाई था. Every Muslim at that time was totally madly in love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there was a time when the same that you are calling harjai, that he loves everyone other than Muslims also, the same one was your real beloved, me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying.
So when you're love, I'm yours. But when things aren't good, you're a harjai.
Yeah, but here, the very subtle message that Iqbal is giving through these words, choice of words, is that ab kisi yakjai se ab aide gulami kar lo. Go become a servant of somebody who sticks to one people only. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does it. He sustains everyone, all his creation. He feeds everyone. And we were basically, Iqbal was being short-sighted and saying that you used to be with us, now you are with them. And here the subtle message is that everything is my creation. You used to be very close to me and you called me everything, and I was the only beloved you had. This is why you felt that way. But now, if that's what you want, then you find somebody that only isolates himself to one corner of the world or one aspect of life, and keep the Millat Ahmed Mursal means the Muslim community.
Right.
Kar lo. Instead of making it global, make it national somewhere, if that's what you want.
Yeah. Amr, you had a point that you wanted to mention about Imam Zaid that you had mentioned?
I did. So Imam Zaid Shakir has a very clever, also a pun that highlights this, where he says, we Muslims are a can-do nation. And the pun is, can in the Arabic sense. So can al-Muslimun yafuzun, can al-Muslimun yuhakkimun, can al-Muslimun. So the Muslims used to do this and the Muslims used to do that. So instead of can do with a C, meaning embracing the future and feeling confident. There's we used to do all these things in the past. So, and there really, there's a place for both, right? Because especially given the historical context, we do need things like, for example, there's an initiative in the UK where they have an exhibit called 1001 Muslim Inventions. So, things that Muslims have brought to the world, because sometimes people may not acknowledge it. So you want to get that out, but you also don't want to convey Islam as something archaic or of the past. So the forward-looking vision of Islam is what you want to communicate as well. So it's that balance. But Imam Zaid says, we're too much of can-do, meaning thinking about the past and not focused on the future.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, in Arabic, kana means it was, right? So kana nasu, the people were, like it's a verse in the Quran, kana nasu ummatan wahida, that the people were one at one point. But at the same time, right? Like I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. We're literally doing exactly that right now, where we're talking about our past. We're talking about past nations, right? But it's about having a good balance. You don't want to be in a place where you talk about the past so much at the expense of the present and future, but you also don't want to talk about the present and the future at the expense of the past. It's about a good balance and keeping that in check consistently.
Yeah, I'd like to add here. I think what Brother Amr mentioned. I'm sorry, Assalamu alaikum, guys. Hassan Said from Atlanta.
Wa alaikum assalam.
What I found fascinating, and based on kind of Brother Nihal,
that went to Oglethorpe.
Yeah, Oglethorpe. Yeah, you know me.
I remember you. Yeah, how are you?
Good. Alhamdulillah. Here, let me help on camera real quick.
It's been a long time since I've seen you.
Yeah, it was the what is it?
That Golden Youth camp. I remember.
Camp, exactly. Yeah. Wow, you've got a great memory.
Yeah.
I would say I guess my point here that chimed in here. Excuse me if I've broken a certain protocol. But what I found really fascinating was hearing you, Nihal, and everybody else kind of speak to this. I would agree with you. Like what you hear among uncles and other points of view of like. Oftentimes you hear that resting on the laurels, but in my generation and below me, as you go into like Gen Z, what you find or see is that connection to like the past doesn't really exist anymore. And so in one case, the generation above me or one or two above me certainly connects to the laurels and like rests a lot more on it, or perhaps they're more liable to err on that side. I'd say the generation where I rest or that comes after me is more so on the other side of the extreme, where we don't really even know what kind of those accomplishments from the golden era were, or that even there is this rich history of success and accomplishment, and many times having that as a foundation to build upon is vital. And you see it in the kind of Black empowerment movement, where you have a unearthing of a lot of amazing things that Black scholars, scientists, and so forth did, but it was sort of erased from the zeitgeist or historical record. And so to bring that forward, I think is important. And we're almost fighting two different issues or plagues on two different generations, so to speak.
Yeah, I really hear and echo what you're saying. Thanks for mentioning that. There was actually a presentation that I was doing a couple of years ago. I haven't done it in a while. I actually did it at Kennesaw State when I was still in Atlanta, but it was basically about bridging the gaps between nationality, identity, and faith, basically. Not from like an academic point of view, but just like the fact that our parents may have been born and raised in one country, came here, and they have a very certain experience of the country that they may have immigrated from, and then from living in America, their experience as well, and then our experience of the fact that we are children of a people who may have come from a different place, and then maybe our kids will not be that much so necessarily connected to their ethnic background. But I think one problem that I see a lot of guys and girls our age going through is that they end up not, because of the fact they don't have their own ethnocentric identity that they can kind of bask in comfort with, they end up aligning themselves with like Arabs if they're Muslims, or they'll end up aligning themselves with the white narrative America, or they'll try to, especially with like a lot of friends that I have that may be leftist leaning, they may align themselves with like the Black narrative of America. And as much as you can stand up for justice, we're not black, right? We're not white. We have our own like ethnic centrality. And now we're struggling with that because growing up, we made fun of our parents' accents. We made fun of desi food. We made fun of all of that. And that had become something that took away from our own identity building, right? And now with like Trump's America, which alhamdulillah, I don't want to say Trump's America is behind us, or at least Trump is behind us. But that rhetoric that like basically maligned immigrants straight up came to bite us in our behinds, right? And I think a lot of what my purpose is, like, obviously Dr. Rahman and myself are two different people born at two different times, but I feel like this discussion that's happening, you know, this is actually, this class reminds me of Imam Ghazali's Ya Walad, or, you know, the To My Son, where you see interactions between a father and a son and what the young person can learn from the interactions and what the older person can learn from the interactions. But I feel like a lot of what we're going through, especially for me, who is Indian American, who's born and raised in New Jersey and then went to India and came back, that is a part of who I am, and this is a part of who I am, and that identity is forming. But this may be random, but Amir, I'd love to hear from you about how one can, or how maybe your own personal experiences of kind of fixing up those bonds as somebody who may be a little bit older, that's born and raised here, who went through school and who's now working, but like, where does that gap begin to be filled?
You know, it's a profound question, and I think that, you know, first of all, when you talk about Ayyuha al-Walad, Imam Ghazali's book, and, you know, mashallah, I've been very fortunate, of course, that to be the son of Dr. Abdurrahman, and in fact, you know, we used to have sessions like this where Dad would read from different, if he had, you know, Kulliyat Iqbal in the house, right? So the collection of Iqbal, anthology of Iqbal's work. So he would read various couplets, and we would talk about them. So I think that you know, a lot of it really is, as you said, sort of generational, and you know, parent to child, and grandparent to grandchild, etc. So creating that chain, as we would have in sort of the Muslim tradition, right? Like, so that silsila, which of course literally means the chain. So the way a chain works, there has to be connection between each point, right? So I think that's critical. And then, you know, honestly, part of it, as you rightly pointed out, is to say, how do we situate our view of Islam within the, you know, the recognizing the South Asian context, the flavor and the thread. So, you know, for example, I don't know if Sajid is still on, but, you know, one thing that he and I, or he talks about, mashallah, is the tradition of philanthropy amongst, you know, the Sufi and Muslim leaders of South Asia, and how, you know, feeding people and supporting people was the way that we expressed the values of Islam. And of course, now at NCGP, the Hunger Van is trying to do the same thing. So I think sort of a short way to summarize it is that, number one, you need those personal connections across the generations. Number two is to know enough about not only Islam in general, but also how Islam is manifested in the places of our origin, and then celebrate that while also not belittling or other aspects or other traditions, but recognizing that's what's unique and special from where we came.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, alhamdulillah. Asad, any thoughts? I know there's something brewing there.
I don't want to take up the space too much, but I think every single comment that you all made was to the point. I think the intergenerational conversation that you alluded to earlier, Nihal, is crucial because, you know, when you talk about tradition, right, as we understand it, tradition is something that is not disembodied or disconnected from that which came before it, and so as people who are embodying tradition or carrying tradition, we're not working off a clean slate, and it's good to acknowledge that, because you know, no one is working off a clean slate. And then I think by acknowledging our ancestors and our predecessors, we are affirming what they've done, but we are also creating a new slate for our successors. right? And so when I think of tradition, and when I think of this a conversation like this one, for me, tradition is a conversation between the past and the future. And the people in the present, meaning us, are the mediators. We are basically mediating between the past and the future. And in that way, I like, time as we think of it, and I think this goes back to what Allama has written about this. Time is not linear the way that, it's traditionally taught in capitalism, or how we're taught to conceive of it, but rather time is something that we are all actively constructing, and actively engaging with in conversation with ourselves, but also in conversation with God Almighty.
Thank you. That was
Excellent.
really insightful.
Excellent.
Anyone else? Like all of you people are quiet today. What happened? is Dr. Molo with us? He may have left. There was something that Sarah had posted by Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah, Islam and the Cultural Imperative. I have yet to read that, but Sarah, if you don't mind, could you actually give us just like a brief rundown of it if you've already read it? If you have audio access?
She may have muted
Assalamu
herself.
alaikum.
Mike's on.
Yeah, basically, it's just a short article. Basically, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It basically is just, he talks about how Islam is sort of like the water in a stream, and the culture is like the rock, making up the stream. And so culture is very much a part of the way you practice faith, and faith isn't devoid of culture. So like as Imam Nihal was talking about, how a lot of times Muslims, like our generation, I guess, like millennials, if we're into religion, we start kind of becoming Arabicized. So yeah, that's kind of the summary in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Nihal, let me just make this point, and that is, regardless of what time period we are talking about, whether we are talking about present or the situation 50 years ago or 50 years from today, here the perspective here to remember is that we are one family, so to speak. So whatever our ancestors did in Hispania, or built that part and had tremendous progress in through Ottoman Empire, all its liabilities and all its fruitfulness, we have inherited that, whether we like it or not. So we are responsible for those things. Now the people that are going back into Spain are in Muslim families and raising the children there, they will have to build it from the ground up, so to speak, because all the Islamic civilization and culture was totally decimated as the Ottoman Empire finished. So the point here that we have to remember, that we have to have a broader picture of this discussion, so that Iqbal, when he's addressing the Muslim Ummah, he's not talking about that particular time or day, although that was the time that he was writing it, but basically it's applicable to us today also, and it was applicable at that time too. And whether there were any faults or were there any gains made, all of that we have to own up to those, and then we move forward. So this will be the perspective, and as we go further in Jawab-e-Shikwa, we will see that we will finally come to a manual as to what we have to follow if we have to correct ourselves and go back to the way of our ancestors. Looking forward to the future lectures, future lessons.
Inshallah. Amir is actually asking to share the couplet you usually start your talks with, the one about the wisdom we have inherited.
Mile hain humko, this is my own verse that I started. Mile hain humko आबा से जो मोती इल्म और हिकमत के, हमारा फर्ज है पहुंचाएं उनको अगली नस्लों तक. The pearls of knowledge and wisdom that we have acquired from our ancestors, it's our obligation now to pass them on to our future generations. In other words, we can't let them perish and perish away and die down, and then start afresh, because we really have tremendous resource that is lying in libraries and probably in Europe, in London and in Paris and everywhere else. We have to seek out, have you ever been to New York Library on 42nd Street? My God, the vast material of the literature that is there is unbelievable. Things that were even censored in some days ago in India or Pakistan, they are available there.
The New York Public Library, sir?
New York Public Library. Yeah, you can spend days in there. So similarly, the resources everywhere. We people who are concerned should go seek it out and translate it and make it available to whosoever we can. It's a tremendous task that we have ahead of us.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you guys are interested. Now meeting us, it was a tremendous, I read as much as I could in the 10 minutes before we started the session, and I'm impressed, amazed at the work that he has done. And he was born in Brooklyn, and so was Amir. My son was born in Brooklyn, and my daughter. So at least we are developing a family now, mashallah, that people will carry on this work forward.
Are people from New Jersey that are born there allowed in as well?
No.
Oh man.
You need to have to buy a token to cross the bridges.
Yeah, we already paid $16. Isn't that
Well,
enough?
then you're allowed. Then you're allowed. You didn't say that.
Okay, everyone, we are like 17 minutes over time, so inshallah, I'm going to call it a night. Jazakallah khair to everyone.
So let me just say one thing.
Yes.
Sorry, Brother Nihal, I could not unmute myself earlier, but thank you. Enjoyed. Didn't have much to add, but the only thing I would ask Dr. Rahman, this, you have an audience, if you could please introduce them to the morning Rumi session, the reflections of the seekers.
Yeah, well, basically you have said it. So we do have a session in the morning on Sundays at 6:30 in the morning, right after Fajr prayer. We get together and we talk about Rumi. As a matter of fact, it was started at the masjid when we were meeting face to face, Mahfil Zikr, and then a little bit of mention of Rumi and lessons from it. And we are carrying that tradition. So if anyone has time in the morning, if you can join us, that would be great. There's a little bit of dua in the beginning and a little bit of zikr in the beginning, which is about 5 minutes or so. And after that, we talk about Masnavi right now. We are talking Lubbe Lubab of Masnavi, Maulana Rumi. We have a brother that speaks Farsi perfectly. So he leads the group and others join me too, because I'm interested in Rumi also. But if you're interested in Iqbal, you're interested in Rumi, whether you know it or not. So Rumi is Persian basically exclusively. Iqbal has Urdu poetry also, but message is the same. And if you can join it, I would invite all of you to please come. I'm glad Brother Mughal reminded me. We could use some more resource there.
Can you all share the link to the 6:30 class, if that's okay? Does anyone have it? Is it broadcast?
It's, yeah, but Brother Zafar does that.
Okay.
Zafar Tahir.
Yeah,
So,
if you just go on MCGP website, this is on that, so you can just see the link from there.
Okay, is it live on the MCGP Facebook?
Most of the time it is, that I understand. I've
Okay.
used that sometimes.
no,
Okay.
but we can ask Brother Zafar if we can have the list of this group, if we have the email, the phone numbers of this group, and we add them to that seeker circle, then they will automatically be notified whether they can join or not. It's a separate issue. But still, I think we should make this information available to everybody that we have on the list.
And I would very strongly recommend it. Really, really good sessions.
Thanks, Brother Mughal. We try.
Okay, inshallah, everyone. I'll let you all go. Subhanakallah, bihamdika, thank you, Asad. Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullah.
Inshallah. Okay.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum.